everyone, and welcome back to the Youth Political Activism channel, or as we like to call it, YPAC. Today I'm going to be further dissecting, again, Wisconsin and Chicago and their elections that they had a few days ago. We already made videos on the individual races. I'll link those down below if you want to check those out. But this video is more so going to be focusing on the impacts of the nation of these elections and also going into 2024. Because what happened on Tuesday night was very surprising to a lot of commentators and people in the political sphere. So I want to further explain what's been going on and also my predictions as to what are the consequences of these for the nation, both in the presidential election and in the midterms in 2024. So, firstly, Chicago. So, Chicago went to the more progressive candidate, Brandon Johnson. This isn't the race that's, most important to me, personally, because we all know Illinois, Chicago, it's a blue state, a very blue city, and so no matter what, both senators are going to be Democrats coming out of Illinois. The state legislature, everything we can assume that they're going to be providing liberal values like access to abortion, things like that follow in line with liberal and democratic values. And so this isn't too surprising. I really believe that this is going to either polarize the urban industrialized cities, well, not industrialized, but urbanized more so, to the outskirts of states and the rural areas. So either LA voted in a very far progressive Karen Bass last November. Chicago just voted in a very far progressive, Bernie Sanders helped Brandon Johnson on his campaign, another very progressive individual. And then are we going to see the same thing? The mayor in New York isn't too far progressive. He's obviously a Democrat, but I don't think he's as progressive as Johnson and Bass are. But, San Francisco also very liberal. Are we going to see that these cities are going to be the example for the state in which the rural areas also teeter a little bit more to the left? Or is there going to be further dichotomy where the rural and suburban areas go farther to the right and the urban areas just go farther to the left? That's something to think about, because usually there's a balance between how liberal and how conservative the rural versus urbanized areas are. And it's not even just in these liberal states. You can take any other state, for example, Nebraska, and take Omaha, Nebraska is going to vote for a Democrat overall versus the rural parts of Nebraska. Comment what you think down below. Do you think that the rural and suburban areas are going to just become more and more polarized? Or do you think that the urban or rural areas are going to follow what the urban areas are doing and teeter more to the left? As we were talking about the Overton window last video, so go check that out as well, because the Overton window, I'm not going to repeat it here since I already talked about it a lot, but it's a really interesting concept where you only have so much to be in the box of normal. More going to the left pulls the average more to the left. So that's kind of the idea here. But going to Wisconsin, because that's the race that I think was very important. So the liberal Janet Protasiewicz won. Now that the liberals have a majority on the Supreme Court, they're going to be expanding things like access to abortion. We're going to see Wisconsin give Wisconsinites the right to have an abortion, especially in a post Roe v. Wade world. It's very important who's in control, whether it's a conservative or a liberal. And now that it's a liberal, we're going to see changes, not only in that, but now we know, especially after Roe v. Wade, we know the importance of a Supreme Court, not only the national Supreme Court, but also the state Supreme Courts. They hold a lot of power over what constituents can do, what happens. Now that we're seeing more culture wars line up, like just the other day, I think it was yesterday, the Supreme Court voted on a transgender school sports case. And, we made a video on that. Go check that out as well. But we see the power that the courts have in everyday lives, especially in this world that's constantly throwing culture wars, whether it be transgender students or banned books, censorship in the classroom, abortion, whatever it may be. Now the liberals have this upper hand and now control what happens in Wisconsin. And then also there's one election in the state Senate for District 8 they also want to talk about. So the Republican won in this race. Again, very tight race, won by 1.8% versus, if we go back to the Supreme Court, Janet Protasiewicz won by 11 points. And I just wanted to look back at what District 8, where it is. It's in this Green Bay area, in, the northeast of Wisconsin. If we compare like what happens on county level in the 2020 election, we see that's mostly Republican, except for Door County, but otherwise it's lean and likely Republican for the most part, except for Menominee County, which again, it's like blue in the sea of red because it's mostly home to Native American reserves and they tend to vote Democratic. So that's why you see that discrepancy there. But otherwise, it's pretty red, except for those two standalone districts. So, and probably it spans a broader area as well than what I was showing, probably this overall arching area. But nevertheless, it's mostly red. So it going to Republicans isn't as of a surprise. You would expect based off the 2020 election results that he would have won by more points, but he didn't. And so I think that this as well is pointing to Wisconsin being more liberal. And in a lot of election predictions that we do on this channel, Wisconsin really is the key swing state. We're going to see Wisconsin have a lot of power in 2024. It's going to be probably one of the key states in my opinion. I think that Pennsylvania isn't going to be a swing state too much anymore, especially if Biden is running again, which he probably is. I think that he could win Wisconsin, whether he's running against Trump or DeSantis or whoever else it is. He's going to win Pennsylvania. That's my prediction. And then Wisconsin, I feel like, is going to replace Pennsylvania as the key swing state. It's going to be probably, this is my prediction, based off, election results and everything. Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, I think, are going to be the four main swing states. Obviously, Georgia holding the most electoral college votes, so that being the most important. And then I think Wisconsin has 11 and Arizona has 12. Wisconsin has 11 and Arizona has 10, or vice versa. So those two are around in the same range, but Nevada only has 6. So Nevada is not as much a key state as Georgia and Wisconsin and Arizona. The candidates for 2024 really need to hone in on Wisconsin and what's going to be happening there. And I think that the Democrats do have an upper hand, but again, it's hard to tell because just in November, Wisconsinites voted in by a very slim majority. Going back and looking at November, what happened in the midterms, Ron Johnson, who's a very far-right conservative, won by 1%. Total. So going out of this race and going into the Supreme Court election, I really thought that Daniel Kelly was going to win this because of what was happening in the midterms. But I think that for a few reasons, Janet Protasiewicz did win, and I mentioned this, one of them at least, in the earlier video, but because, and this isn't supposed to be a dig or anything, but usually liberals do stay more up to date with the news and local elections, and they do have a higher voter turnout. So that could possibly be why, but also because Janet Protasiewicz and the DNC put in so much money. This was the most costly Supreme Court election in the history of the United States. $40 million went into this race, majority of it being by Janet Protasiewicz, her donors, the DNC across the state, because they really saw the value and importance of this election and what it means on a national scale. I wanted to clarify one of the main reasons I think that the Republican base at least didn't get the message of this election or wasn't aware of it. We see the very low voter turnout, probably not as high certainly as the national elections. If we look at those in Wisconsin, they're like about 3.2 million votes. In this one, only 1.8, which is still pretty good for a election that wasn't happening like in November, where voters also vote for other races as well. So it's still good when you look at the grand scheme of things, but not as good as it could be, of course. But also I think it's because conservative commentators and figureheads, and Trump especially, didn't vocalize the message of this election and how important it is, because it really is. Trump didn't send out a single truth social tweet, or I think they're called truths. He didn't send out a single truth to notify his supporters of this race and have them vote for Daniel Kelly. If he did, and if that had happened, we could have seen a very big change in this election. But just like looking at it from an 11-point standpoint, Janet Protasiewicz really has won this race by a very large proportion that isn't even considered a close race, really. So it's interesting to see what we're going to be looking at in 2024. And if I had to make a bet on Democrats or Republicans in 2024 winning Wisconsin, first of all, it really matters on who's running. Say if it's Biden and DeSantis versus Biden and Trump, those are going to be two very different outcomes. And again, this is my analysis based on what I think has been going on, but I think if it's Trump versus Biden, it goes to Trump. If it's Biden versus DeSantis, it goes to Biden. So those are my opinions. Comment yours down below if you think they differ. Make sure to comment, like, subscribe, watch our videos on the two other, both the Chicago race individually and the Wisconsin race, like the background, a breakdown of where the votes came from and everything. I'll link those below. And we have a TikTok and Instagram, obviously the YouTube, the TikTok and Instagram at bhhs.ypac, and more shorts on. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.